kind of want to start with a question to all of you. I mean, this isn't your typical detective show. It's a crime drama with like deep political and historical themes. So to all of you, what makes Get Millie Black different from traditional crime dramas, and what makes the story special to you? We can start at the end with you, Joe.
With me?
Yes.
Yeah.
The least qualified
You
person to answer
drink your water. I'm just giving you some time.
Well, I mean, I think, as you say, Get Millie Black, it is a cop thriller, and as such, it sort of has to have the apparatus of those cop shows that everyone will be familiar with. But I think what Marlon is amazing at, and that I can say as someone who had never been to Jamaica before shooting the show, and sort of reading the script being my sort of first point of contact with it, was that he's just such a master not only of character and of plot, but of place. Like, I'd never been to Jamaica before, but I could feel it through the page as I was reading the script, and I think it translates incredibly well onto the screen. And I think that, Marlon's talked in the past during the press run for the American transmission about Kingston being as much of a character in this show as any of the sort of physical characters, and I think that that's right. And in terms of the political and the historical themes that you mentioned, it is a show that again, something that Marlon is brilliant at, which is no mean feat, is addressing grand themes but with real subtlety through everyday characters. And I think that's because a lot of those overarching subjects, the legacy of colonialism, two of the lasting sort of remnants of that being sort of capitalism, Christianity. These are the things that are so entrenched in not only Jamaican culture, but you could say culture here as well, that they are actually insidious sort of by their very nature. They don't clobber you over the head the second you step off the plane in Kingston. And I think that's the real art of this show. It's a cop show, but it's about so much more in so many subtle ways that reveal themselves to you as the show progresses.
I think some of the answers are obvious. A Black Caribbean woman being the focus of it, and it's a character who is complicated and difficult, and Millie has your back, but she's also a pretty difficult and complicated friend. And I think it's for me, one of the things I noticed, because I watch a lot of crime shows and I read a lot of crime novels, was that only the men get to be complicated, or get to be difficult, or only the men get to have a sort of an irredeemable flaw.
I mean, yeah, for me, what is so special about this show is how it platforms international talent, really. It was just Joe, Gershwyn and I that was the three cast from the UK for 3 months filming in Kingston. So, everybody that you see really in the first 4 episodes is local cast. And I think, whenever we seen the Caribbean, and Jamaica specifically portrayed in this way, I think seeing downtown, uptown Kingston, seeing the sort of nuances of white Jamaicans and, Indo-Chinese Jamaicans, and across the series we see all the, Jamaican slogan, Jamaica's motto is out of many one people. And I think our understanding of sort of race and class can be quite binary here, but I think the Caribbean is a much more nuanced mix of people, and so to see such a diversity of cast but that they're all Jamaican for me is really special, but especially trans and queer Jamaicans, again, with Jamaica being sort of touted as one of the most homophobic countries in the world, there is a huge queer community, and to meet someone like China, not only meet her personally, but to see her centered in this way, to see people empathize with her, and her storyline, I think, is really, really powerful.
And it'd be interesting to know the ways in which you felt like you could connect to Willie, because this was, when you went to film the show, this was the first time you were back in Jamaica since you were like a toddler. So I wonder if that distance away actually helped you to kind of identify with a bit of her time trying to go back and reintegrate and kind of essentially prove herself despite her time away.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a parallel experience there, being someone who has a dual identity, as it were. Obviously, London is so entrenched in Jamaican culture, and so I felt very Jamaican, as it were. But then going there, I was obviously, you know, as we know as Black Brits, there's this sort of otherization. And I experienced that on the other side, where I was like, no, you know, I'm a yardie. And they were just like, ew, British. Yeah, and I think I was very hit with that, and also kind of the privilege of that, because obviously being here and not identifying with privilege, not being raised in privilege, but going there and having to reckon with the fact that, yes, I am privileged by way of being born in the UK. And I think Millie has that experience as well by being sent to the UK. She has ultimately a survivor's guilt, because she has opportunities that Hibiscus doesn't have. And so I think much of her driving force stems from this sense of guilt and responsibility that she has to sort of fix things and take care of everyone, and right the wrongs of a sort of marred childhood, which I think is, you know, what Marlon does so brilliantly in plotting Millie's obsession with children and kind of re-ingratiating them into home. And and so I think I really understood why she is the way she is.
Yeah. And even on that point as well, one thing that comes up consistently throughout the series is this idea of like ghosts and spirits. Mm-hmm. And obviously you've spoken about children, I think of purity. And I wonder, like, what role does, yes, spirituality, yes, play in Jamaican culture, but how is it also used as to shape the plot in this show as well?
I'm not sure, because at one point, and not only was I in church, I was the church exorcist. So if any of you possessed, you meet me afterwards. I'm pretty good at driving out demons. There are times that I think I'm an atheist as well. But I think to be in a place like Jamaica is almost like being in, say, New Orleans or Cape Town or Mexico City. You're just haunted. And it's history, as Millie says. It's the past. It's the violence and the legacy of colonialism and slavery. It's when you're in Jamaica, you're sort of dealing with the past and the future at the same time. I'm not even sure we're even in a present. We're kind of looking behind and looking ahead at the same time. So when you're in that situation, no wonder a lot of Jamaicans believe in ghosts, or duppy, as we would say, and I kind of do myself. It's funny. I bought this house in Jamaica, and some guys are working on it, and they called me a couple of weeks ago, said they need some white rum. And I was like, I'm not encouraging drinking on the job. It wasn't for drinking. So I said, why? I said, I said, duppy, I'm by the way every night up here. And I'm like, oh my God, I got 4 ghosts in my house. So I had to send the white rum. It seems ghosts love white rum. I have not a complaint since. Which just illustrates how, and actually they take it seriously, so I took it seriously. I'm like, of course my house is haunted.
Yeah.
But it just shows that the way in which, even on a very basic personal level, Jamaica is a country haunted by a lot of things.
Yeah. And
I think even on that level of me sending white rum up the hill, it's an example of just the literal haunting of the country.
Yeah, and Joe, in a way, I feel like Holborn is somewhat of a ghost, of like a colonial relic, coming in the form of the police. Like, what was it like to kind of play that role, and did you kind of understand the weight that character carried by being in this space and being the representative of British policing system?
She's calling him the Babylon white boy.
In less words, I guess.
It's called it. You wrote people calling you that every day. I think, to be honest, the character of Holborn, as I said in my previous answer, the scripts and the themes really revealed themselves to me over time, and so, of course, I was aware of like the fact that Holborn is incredibly conspicuous, when he arrives in the show, and knowing Millie's history with the Met Police, just his presence is a real discombobulating factor for her in that opening episode. And how much does he know about what happened when she was in the force? And so I was sort of aware of his narrative significance in that sense. But I guess, again, the broader themes of what he represents revealed themselves to me over time. I think as you learn more about Holborn, he himself is a very complex character, but he and Millie sort of discover that they have a lot of similarities. They share a lot of the same qualities in terms of how tenacious they are and the lengths to which they're willing to go to achieve their aims. But their differences are also that real counterpoint. The difference in again, it's not something that's touched on overtly. It's just implicit in the show. Here is one character who has risen high and risen fast through this organization, and one who was, sort of ostracized and made to feel like she was incredibly difficult to work with. And it's sort of, the way that their differences and the way that has allowed them to move through the world on the restrictions it's placed on, say, Millie and the freedoms it's given Holborn are pretty stark, and it kind of the show sort of says it without saying it. So it was great to be the representative of rock and correct.
But I wonder if any, I mean, not to give away what happens, but like, are there any ways in which your characters are probably quite similar? You were obviously or raised working under the same institution. There must be things that you both internalize and things where you see eye to eye, as well as, also being like combative against each other because you have experienced it in two different ways.
Yeah, but we learned that they both came from poverty, and that start in life is in different ways the thing that is driving them in the present day. I think, for Holborn, he is someone who is, they're both. I mean, Millie is someone who is sort of running headlong towards her past, and Holborn is someone who's trying to get away from it but can never quite outrun it. So yeah, they share some qualities as well.
Yeah, and I think they both, on some level, understand that you have to sort of break the rules to play the game and to kind of get, both of them in the way that they explore and exploit and kind of manipulate people to get information and get what they want are renegades and people who are working outside of the constructs of the system. But it's as Joe alluded to, it's something that that the Holborn character benefits from, that duplicity in a way that Millie doesn't. And we see very often that people in Holborn's position are not penalized for that kind of corruption, whereas Millie is risking a lot by not by towing the line, but ultimately it's for justice, whereas I think Holborn's motivations are maybe a little bit more self-interested.
Well, yeah, and it's also that thing you're saying, they both know how to play the game, but they play it very differently. And I think Holborn, and again this might be because of the fact that he's a white man, is he's much more of a. They're both very good at getting people to do what they want, but Holborn makes that other person think that they're doing it for themselves rather than him, whereas Millie, it's much more of an overt. The people that are helping Millie out know exactly who they're breaking the rules for.
Yeah. I mean, there's a line in one of the episodes where somebody says to Millie, Holborn, follows the rules, and then Millie said that men like Holborn created the rules, so of course they can follow it. To me, they're both driven in a certain way, and they're both kind of searching for something. They're slightly lost. Both of them are lost children in a way. But for me, and I said this, I saw it, growing up with a female cop in the 70s, just how, the same situation gets dealt with differently. Or they face different things, even when they're dealing with the same problem. I mean, my mom, in the 60s and 70s, she has to be a cop, but she also has to make the male cops feel like they're smarter than her. And I'm like, well, of course, she's surrounded by dumb men her whole life. But it's just a drain, trying to be a good cop, but also trying to be a player and trying to not fit in. And I think at some point before Millie even comes to Jamaica, she was like, screw that. Like I'm just not gonna, one of the contrasts between Millie is when she comes across, Curtis, who tries so hard to sort of blend in. Millie can't blend in even if she tries.
There's also something really interesting about Millie in the sense that she's so unfiltered. And I know this has already come out in the States, and you said like it's been received really well. Did you have any, not worries, but I guess like, you know what British people are like, right? You have this black woman on here being like, have you come to colonize my case? Like, it's just so explicit. There's no dancing around it. There's no fluffy language. There's no, you can infer. It just is what it is. And obviously, I love watching that. And I'm like, this is exactly how we should speak. But I guess in your mind, you said, I'm going to write something that is, they're definitely going to turn down.
Yeah.
Did you have a fear that, when this is released to the British public, that people might feel some way about it?
Not really. In fact, I kind of hope some people feel a way about it. It's funny enough, I find Americans are more worried about how British people react to it, because I see how I am sometimes in interviews and the stuff I talk about. Like, I remember my first time to London was 19-something, the last century. And somebody asked me, how you like in London? I'm like, oh my God, I love London. Your racism is so cute here. It's actually kind of cuddly. It's like, I'm all for Paddington hate. So the TV show is like that as well, that we're not sort of bullshitting about the past. And the fact is that the Jamaica-UK relationship has been incredibly fruitful, but also very, very violent and exploitative, and there is still a lot of stuff to answer for. And Millie, Millie doesn't come from somewhere where she keeps quiet. For all sorts of reasons, and yes, she is very sensitive to the ways in which, and she says it's one of the first things she says about rollover for the white boy investigation, because on one hand, there are few people, like living in Jamaica, there are few people more assertive and boisterous than us, but at the same time, we can turn very meek and mild when tourists show up. And I think, it's like there's still places in Jamaica where I can't get in with a t-shirt and jeans when a tourist can. I mean, that happened just last week at a restaurant I will not shame on camera. But what I'm saying is we're still dealing with those things. And a character like Millie, who's seen the best and worst of the UK, is not coming to Jamaica to tolerate that crap.
Right.
And you'll see one of the first scenes in episode 2 is her showing, no, I'm not taking this bullshit here. I think that might be up to TVJ. I mean, everybody in Jamaica has cable now, so pretty much most Jamaicans have already seen it. I'm not sure if it will appear on the local network. That'd be interesting. On one hand, I think, as a pretty out queer person, I'm in Jamaica a lot, actually. And I actually feel quite comfortable there. We're just actually shooting a documentary about being queer and returning to Jamaica that we're literally filming right now. So it's what I find in Jamaica is, I think it's not just Jamaica. I think it's an aspect of black and brownness where you instinctively go for community. And sometimes you find this, it's like, you see it in communities in Jamaica, you see it in the States. It's like, she a freak, but she our freak. And he a homo, but he our homo. He the drunkard, but he our drunkard. And I think that instinct towards community sometimes override even the hate. And I've seen that as well, and I see that happens quite a bit. Stacey Ann Chin, who's a pretty old lesbian poet, has been setting up a thing called Kindred on the Rock in rural Jamaica. And she just sort of gets to know the Jamaican population. And she also confronts the homophobia straight up, like people who still link homosexuality and pedophilia. And she was like, listen, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to knock down 4 of the walls in my house. Anybody can literally walk in at any point, any time in the day. Because I got nothing to hide. And it's amazing the way in which that outreach and so on is working in that community. It means, yeah, there's some work. But I think, certainly what I'm saying is more and more Jamaicans are open to doing the work. So, yeah.
Sure.
Which is not the question you asked, but that's how I answered it.
I was following, I was clicking along.
I'm looking at Tamara because some of the code switching wasn't in the script. You did that instinctively.
Oh, that was a writing question. That was definitely a writing
It's a bit
question.
both.
So yeah, there was a lot of that in it. Most days I am code switching, depending on the audience. If I'm in Jamaica, I do not sound like this. So yeah, there's a lot of that happened. But I also think one of the things that clinched it for me with Tamara was she didn't need coaching about where Millie slides into Jamaican as opposed to otherwise. It's something that was super organic. But some of those lines I didn't write.
I mean, I don't remember. I guess, again, being kind of British Jamaican, seeing my mum code switch, the code switching that we do depending on where we are. And I think I really wanted Millie to use it kind of either to alienate people or to make them feel safe and draw closer. But yeah, I think I especially like that it's one of the first ways in which she confronts Holborn, because I think, as you were saying as well, Millie being a character that is not palatable is very important, that she's able to call out the fact that, you've come here and you expect all of this. You expect me to just sort of defer to your authority. And she's asserting that, yes, she is British, but she is also Jamaican, and her Jamaicanness is very... she's very empowered and very in her blackness, which is so important to see, because a lot of the time we see very palatable, coony black characters a lot of the time, to be honest. And it's important to see black people that are pro-black. It's like her man is black, her friends are black, like she's black. And so I really, really identified with that in the script and wanted to kind of really lent into that, because it felt like a huge relief and a release for me to be able to play a character that is not shying away from all of her facets.
Yeah, actually. But I think in the sense that boundaries are being crossed, the sense that things that aren't necessarily a boundary is talking back to rich people. Sort of, having the last word when you're talking to people who are sort of not in your class, but also taking queerness as just a matter of fact. They're having the characters having 3-dimensional lives. It was. We even had before Tamara and those guys showed up. We even had a sort of a real discussion with the Jamaican crew, and not that they necessarily needed it. They've seen everything pretty much, but yeah, there was that. But I also think there was a sense of relief and a sense of release. I think in Jamaica, a lot of us are just dying to have the conversations, and I think we're ready to have it. We're probably not going to start it, but the thing about this show, I think, is that it gives more people the sort of impetus to have that conversation. So yeah, it's. I know for some people it's bracing as a shock, and it's new and it's different, but I also think it has freed up a lot of people to talk about things that they have not spoken about, but probably been waiting to talk about.
I don't think we have time for any more questions, so that will close our discussion. Thank you so much for chatting to us, and this was a brilliant first episode, and I can't wait for everyone to watch the rest. Can we give them another round of applause?